Three steps come to mind which are short but not succeeding very often. First one is that in all Arctic communications and whatever we are able to communicate further into decision makers, we should be allowing or enabling direct Indigenous voice to recount what's going on, especially Indigenous women. We have a world-class Sami leader here, Pauliina Feodorov. She's one of the Venice Biennale internationally recognized artists, but she's also known in the Sami world as one of the greatest human rights defenders for land and waters and forests. So step one would be to correct what's being often the hindrance or bottleneck moment where we are retelling the information instead of allowing it, for the lack of better term, to be heard directly in high levels of decision makers. Secondly, I think Arctic Passion and the work that will happen in the pilot services and many work packages could address what I have sometimes called the unknown Arctic, which is that we think we know and we are making decisions based on that, but more and more you actually work with Indigenous communities, you start to realize how there is an unknown Arctic, both in temporal and spatial scale. What used to be seen as an empty space with ice and polar bears and okay, maybe some Inuits on the ice edge, is actually a living landscape. I would even go as far as to say sentient landscape. And if that's true that the landscape is actually sentient and alive, and Indigenous peoples, much like all over the world, are coexisting with their non-human people, that's a profound message on how do we decide on a precautionary principle what to do with the Arctic. Do we invest more in oil and gas, shipping, industrial mining in these landscapes that we are now waking up to realize that are sentient and filled potentially with non-human, shall we say, aware beings? And what are the implications if that's true? And most likely it seems to be true. In academia it's known as a socio-ecological system, but it's actually, if you actually physically try to put it in words, one way of capturing it has to do with the sentient landscapes. And that's a profound discovery that we heard, for example, here. The last point that I want to make is somehow ensuring that the EU-funded and EU-coordinated activities, doesn't matter what the results are, but they would be translated into national governmental portfolios and decision makers. Could we, for example, ask 15-minute meeting with Prime Minister Marin or other prime ministers in the Arctic countries and communicate main findings, main urgencies that we have now discovered and continue to discover. For example, that it is extremely complex in Greenland with sea ice. There are so many things Finland and Denmark could do together. It is of absolute climate security to maintain Sami boreal forests intact and not to clear cut them. They're not also making any profit out of them, but these kind of novel discoveries. So those are the 3 points that I think would be very important, that communicating, allowing direct voice, and maybe the second point is the hardest. It will come in many ways, but at least some of the scientists also could come out of here understanding that we're actually dealing with living landscapes and co-inhabitants of very unique human societies that have maintained relations, if not always balance, with those landscapes for thousands of years.